Nobody warns you that you can spend a lifetime with someone and never meet them, and that the someone is you. Think of the last time you were truly alone. Did the tension leave your shoulders in a way that almost frightened you? Did a different person step forward, holding opinions you never voice, needs you've never admitted even to the mirror? You felt the gap between the face you wear and the thing living behind it. You've caught yourself faking a laugh, performing warmth for someone you don't trust, smiling through praise, aimed at a version of you that isn't real, and quietly resenting how easily they were fooled. Here's what they never told you. The mask you wear to survive was never meant to become your permanent face. You were taught that adjusting yourself was politeness, that being liked was safety, that a person who is always agreeable is always loved. What they didn't say is that a self shaped entirely by what others find acceptable isn't a self at all. It's a costume, and the being inside that costume slowly forgets it exists. You didn't stumble onto this. You were pulled. Something in you has been quietly refusing the performance, and it's finally grown loud enough to make you search. You're standing at a threshold most people never notice. Behind one door, you tighten the costume and perform until it's all that remains at your funeral. Behind the other, you meet the one who's been living underground beneath your own name, waiting for your courage to catch up with your intelligence. Jung didn't say the privilege is to be who you are. He said to become. That means the self you present isn't yet the self you are. There's a distance, and most people never cross it. They spend a lifetime performing a self assembled by other hands, buried in a coffin that never held the real occupant. The culture benefits from your confusion because a person who doesn't know themselves will accept any definition handed to them. The persona, once a healthy tool, was quietly captured by systems that needed you compliant. The mask thickened until you couldn't tell where it ended and your face began. What you're about to receive is a map, not motivation, not affirmation. You'll learn how your persona was built, how the real you was driven underground, how to spot the exact moments you vanish into the costume, and how to call yourself back. And at the end, the one insight Jung buried at the center of his work that most readers miss because it costs too much to see. The real answer to who you are, visible only when the mask comes off. If these ideas resonate, hit subscribe for more top-tier content. Drop unmasked in the comments so I know you're ready. Let's dive in. Before you can meet the one behind the face, you have to understand exactly how the face was built, because you did not choose it. You inherited it in pieces from 1,000 small moments you have long since forgotten. Somewhere around age 3, you noticed that certain expressions of yourself brought warmth toward you, and certain expressions brought coldness. You were a small animal in a large environment, and your nervous system was doing what nervous systems do. It was learning what was safe. You noticed that when you were loud, a certain face closed. You noticed that when you cried too long, a certain voice sharpened. You noticed that when you asked for something too directly, the room shifted in ways that made you feel unsafe. And so, without ever making a conscious decision, you began to prune. You quieted the parts of yourself that seemed to bring distance. You amplified the parts that seemed to bring closeness. You did this thousands of times before you were old enough to know you were doing it. And by the time you had language for yourself, the pruning was already complete. You looked at the shape that remained and you called it me. But it was not you. It was a survival adaptation. It was the version of you that got the most milk, the most warmth, the least punishment, the least isolation. It was a strategy. And here is the specific horror that Jung understood. The strategy worked. It got you through childhood. It got you into adulthood. It got you the relationships you have, the job you have, the friends you have. It was successful. And precisely because it was successful, no one, including you, ever questioned whether it was true. Notice the exact texture of what I'm describing. You are at a family gathering. Someone says something that lands wrong in you. A small private no rises in your chest, and before that no can reach your face. Another mechanism, faster, older, more automatic, replaces it with a nod, a soft laugh, a change of subject. You watch yourself do it. You feel the small dissonance, and then you move on, because to name the dissonance would be to unravel a system that has been holding your life together since you were 4. That is the persona in real time. That is the costume operating below the level of your conscious choice. And you have been doing this so long that the costume feels like your skin. The people who have taken advantage of you were not interested in you. They were interested in the costume. The costume was useful to them. The costume gave, the costume accommodated, the costume never quite said no. And now that you are beginning to sense the being underneath, and that being is beginning to stir, some of those people are already becoming uncomfortable in your presence. They do not know why. You do not fully know why yet either, but you will. Beneath the costume, something else has been living. Jung called it the shadow, and the word has been so overused it has almost lost its edge. Let me sharpen it again. The shadow is not evil. The shadow is not your dark side in some cinematic sense. The shadow is everything about you that did not survive the pruning. Every trait you were told was too much. Every desire you were told was unacceptable. Every intelligence you were told was arrogance. Every anger you were told was ugly. Every need you were told was selfish. Every strange, specific, original thing about you that did not fit the shape of the family, the school, the culture, the room. All of it was still in you. It just went underground. And underground, in the dark, it kept living. You have felt it. You have felt it in the moments when a completely inappropriate thought rose in you and you were startled by your own mind. You have felt it in the small, private cruelty you noticed in your own reaction to someone else's success. You have felt it in the strange sadness that arrived when a friend told you good news. You have felt it in the flash of anger that came out of nowhere when someone touched a boundary you did not know you had. You have felt it in the dreams that show you scenes you would never consciously imagine. That was not the enemy speaking. That was the underground. That was the pruned self, still alive, sending signals to the surface, signals you were trained to be ashamed of. Here is the part almost no one will say out loud. The shadow contains not only what you were told was bad about you, it contains what you were told was too much. Your intensity, your intelligence, your capacity for solitude, your instinct to say no, your refusal to be small, all of the things that a compliant environment could not tolerate got exiled together, and they have been living in the same underground room ever since. Which means the treasure is buried in the same place as the discomfort. You cannot recover one without walking past the other. And this is why so few people ever complete the journey. Because the door to the underground is guarded by exactly the emotions you were trained to run from: shame, anger, grief, desire. To meet the real you, you have to be willing to feel what you spent a lifetime learning not to feel. Most people will not do it. Most people would rather die a stranger to themselves than sit for 10 uninterrupted minutes with what has been living underneath. But you are still here. You are still listening. And that fact alone should tell you something about which category you belong to. Let me name what the mask has actually cost you, because until you feel the cost clearly, you will not commit to the removal. And the cost is not what you think. You think the cost has been in the relationships that drained you, in the jobs that used you, in the people who left. Those were the visible costs, and they were real. But the deeper cost, the one Jung wanted his patients to see, is the cost of a life spent inside an experience that was never quite yours. Consider it carefully. You have been present at every hour of your own life, and yet, if you are honest, there are entire years you cannot remember with any real texture, entire seasons that blur into one another, entire decades in which you were technically alive but not particularly there. That is not memory failing. That is the persona living the life while the real occupant was elsewhere. Rooms that a costume walked through do not get remembered in high definition. Only the real self records in color. The specific ache you feel when you look back at photographs of yourself from 10, 15, 20 years ago, and you almost do not recognize the person in them. That is not nostalgia. That is the underground you meeting the costume you and grieving the gap between them. There was a life that the real you was supposed to be living, and the costume lived a different one instead. You are grieving the correct thing. You just have not had language for it. And here is where the shame begins to cycle, because part of you right now is starting to wonder how much time you have already lost. How many years you spent nodding when you wanted to shake your head. How many relationships you sustained past the point your instinct had already ended them. How many opportunities the costume declined because they would have required the real you to step forward and be visible. The shame rises. Let it rise. And then hear this clearly. You did not fail. You survived. The costume was not weakness. The costume was intelligence. It was the most sophisticated adaptation a small human could make to a large, indifferent environment. It kept you safe until you were strong enough to no longer need it. The mistake is not that you built it. The mistake is that no one ever told you it was safe to take it off. Now someone is telling you. The moment you understand that the costume was a service, not a crime, something shifts. You stop hating the version of yourself that performed. You start feeling something closer to tenderness for her, for him, for the small being who did what had to be done. And that tenderness is the exact key that unlocks the underground. The shadow does not open to shame. The shadow opens to compassion. You cannot bully yourself into wholeness. You can only welcome yourself into it. That is the sentence that will still be with you 3 days from now. Now here is where I have to break something for you gently, because everything I have said so far you have probably heard some version of before. Meet your shadow, take off the mask, be authentic. These phrases are so common now that they have become another layer of costume. There is a version of self-discovery that is itself a performance. There is a person who reads Jung and turns Jungian into another mask to wear. There is a person who talks endlessly about their shadow work and never actually confronts a single thing. There is a person who says the phrase authentic self so often that authentic self becomes the newest costume in the wardrobe. This is the reversal that most people cannot survive intellectually, so let me hand it to you slowly. The real self is not a thing you find and then perform. The moment you begin performing authenticity, you have already re-entered the costume. The real self is not a role, it is not a look, it is not a way of speaking or a set of preferences. It is not the you who defies your family loudly at Thanksgiving. It is not the you who tells everyone you have finally started saying no. Those can also be masks, louder masks, rebellious masks, but still masks. The real self is not what you present. It is what remains when there is no one to present to. It is the quality of attention that operates when the performance goes offline. It is the way you sit in a room when you are certain no one will ever describe it. It is the specific texture of your own thoughts when they are not being curated for an imagined audience. It is not loud. It does not have a brand. It does not need followers. It is not, in any sense that would translate to a social media bio, marketable. This is why the culture cannot sell it back to you. And this is why almost no one arrives at it, because the entire economy of your attention is built to keep you in some form of costume, whether the costume is compliant or rebellious, agreeable or edgy, quiet or loud. Sit with that for a moment. The real you cannot be performed. The moment it is performed, it becomes another persona, which means the meeting with yourself cannot happen in public. It cannot happen in a caption. It cannot happen in a declaration. It can only happen in the specific interior silence where no one is watching, including the part of you that has learned to watch yourself as if you were being watched. That inner audience is the last mask, and that inner audience is what almost no one is willing to release, because the inner audience is the residue of everyone who ever looked at you. Your mother, your father, your first heartbreak, your worst teacher, the person whose approval you could never quite earn. They have all taken up residence inside your head, and they have been watching you perform even when you are alone. The real self begins when they finally get evicted. Not everyone can hear this. Notice that you can. Notice that something in you is not flinching away. That is a signal. Hold it. Now the actual work, because everything before this has been diagnosis, and diagnosis without practice is another form of costume, an intellectual costume. Let me give you the specific mechanics of descent. The first practice is what Jung sometimes called active imagination, and I will translate it into modern language. Sit alone, no phone, no music, no input. 10 minutes to start. Not to meditate, not to be peaceful, to be present with whatever rises. And what will rise, if you sit long enough, is exactly what you have been avoiding. A memory you have not touched in years, an emotion you did not know you were carrying, a voice inside you that does not sound like the voice you use in public. When it rises, do not push it away. Do not fix it. Do not narrate it. Watch it. That is all. Just watch it, the way you would watch a stranger enter a room. Over weeks, this practice does something surgical. It creates space between you and the automatic productions of your own mind. And in that space, the observer becomes more distinct from the performance. The one underneath begins to have room to breathe. The second practice is the audit of the small betrayals. Once a day, at the end of the day, notice one moment when you disappeared into the costume, not to punish yourself, to see. You said yes when you meant no. You laughed when you did not find it funny. You minimized a need. You performed an interest you did not have. Notice without judgment and name it privately, just to yourself. This practice does something the mind cannot do while the costume is running. It builds the muscle of self-witness, and self-witness, over time, becomes the ground of the sovereign self. You cannot become who you are while lying to yourself about who you are pretending to be. The audit does not require you to change anything yet. It only requires you to see. Change follows sight. Change cannot precede sight. The third practice is the reclamation of one small, unacceptable trait. Pick one thing about yourself that was pruned early. One preference, one opinion, one appetite. One way of being that you were told was too much or too little or too strange. And in one small area of your life this week, permit it. Not as declaration, not as performance, just as private reality. Wear the color you were told did not suit you. Say the thing you always soften. Take the hour of solitude you have been calling selfish. This is not therapy. This is archaeology. You are digging up one buried artifact of your original self and letting it into the daylight of your ordinary life. The shadow does not integrate through grand gestures. The shadow integrates through small, repeated permissions. And here is what will happen. Some of the people around you will feel the shift before you can name it, and they will react. Some will draw closer, because the being underneath is more real to them than the costume ever was, and they have been hungry for a real encounter with you for years. Others will become subtly hostile because the costume was what allowed the dynamic to function, and without the costume, they do not know what to do with you. Both reactions are data. Neither one is a verdict on your worth. You are simply becoming legible to yourself in a way that others cannot always follow. That is the price of the ticket. And it is a price the sovereign self is willing to pay, because the alternative, another decade in the costume, is no longer bearable. Now the deeper cut, because you have earned it by getting this far. Everything I just described, the shadow, the persona, the underground, the descent, is still, in a certain sense, a story, a useful story, a story Jung himself would have endorsed. But it is a story, and there is a layer beneath the story that most people never touch. Because the story is comforting, and the layer beneath is not comforting, it is only true. The layer beneath is this. There is no fixed, final, permanent, real you waiting to be discovered like buried treasure. That framing is itself a kind of costume, a spiritual costume, the belief that if you just dig deep enough, you will find a stable, unified, authentic self who has been waiting the whole time. That is not what Jung actually described. What Jung described was individuation, which is not a discovery, but a lifelong process. It is not that a real you is hidden. It is that the real you is a living relationship, an ongoing conversation between the many parts of who you are, the light and the shadow, the persona and the underground, the conscious and the unconscious. The real self is not a static object beneath the mask. The real self is what emerges when all the parts of you are finally in honest communication with each other, instead of one part running the show while the others are exiled to the basement. Which means the goal is not to rip off the mask and reveal the true face beneath. The goal is to become the one who is no longer identified with any single face, the one who can wear the persona when the persona is useful and set it down when it is not. The one who can visit the underground without becoming lost there, the one who is larger than any single expression of themselves. This is what Jung called the self with a capital letter. And it is not a thing you are. It is a way you exist. It is not the deepest layer of the onion. It is the one who is holding the onion. Sit with that. Because that is the insight most readers of Jung miss entirely. They think shadow work is about becoming their shadow. It is not. It is about becoming the one who is in relationship with their shadow. They think authenticity is about performing the underground instead of the persona. It is not. It is about no longer being controlled by either. The costume is not the enemy. The identification with the costume is the enemy. And when the identification loosens, the costume becomes a tool again, exactly as it was originally meant to be. You can wear it when it serves you. You can take it off when it does not. And underneath, there is no final face to reveal. There is only the one who chooses. That is the freedom no one ever told you existed. Not the freedom to finally be authentic. The freedom to no longer need authenticity as an identity in the first place. Now, imagine 6 months from now. You are alone in a room, and the silence does not require filling. There is no low hum of imagined observers in the back of your mind. The parents, the teachers, the exes, the strangers whose approval you once organized your life around have all quieted. Not because you rejected them, because you no longer need their commentary to know you exist. You do something small, you make tea, you look out a window. You have a thought that no one will ever hear, and the thought is enough. It does not need to be shared to be real. There is a specific new sensation in your chest, and it is unfamiliar because you have not felt it before in any sustained way. It is the sensation of being at home in yourself, not proud, not performing, not defended, just present. The one who has always been underneath the costume is finally sitting in the same room as the one who wore it, and they are not fighting anymore. They are just here together, you together. And other people begin to feel it before you understand what they are feeling. There is a quiet you carry now that they cannot name. There is a gravity that they can sense even in small interactions. They do not know that they are meeting for the first time the person you actually are, but they can feel that something has arrived. Some of them are drawn to it, some of them are unsettled by it. Both reactions are correct. You are no longer the costume they used to know. You are the one you never met, meeting the world for the first time. This is the work, this is the arc. This is the privilege Jung was talking about, and it turns out the privilege is not comfort. The privilege is the becoming itself. The privilege is that a human life can, if you are willing, contain an actual meeting with the one who has been living behind your name. Most people miss it. You do not have to. If this reached the part of you that has been waiting quietly for someone to say this without softening it, subscribe. Not because I asked, because you understand now that the work you have just glimpsed cannot be done in a single video. It is layered. It goes deeper. There is more to see about how the persona was built in you specifically. More to say about how the shadow returns for those who welcome it. More to walk through in the long descent into the self. This is one of the few rooms where that walk is treated with the seriousness it deserves. Stay in the room, and whatever you do, don't stop now. The on-screen video matters more than you think. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. I'll see you there. See what others miss. Know what others fear. Become who others can't.